Infant mortality rates are often used as a predictor of the health status of a country. A society is said to be thriving when the birth rate is high, but is in danger when the birth rate is low or there is a high rate of infant mortality. The definition of the infant mortality rate by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, is the number of deaths under 1 year of age occurring among the live births in a given geographical area during a given year per 1,000 live births occurring among the population of the given geographical area during the same year. The infant mortality rate is calculated by dividing the number of infant deaths before 1 year of age by the number of live births in the same time period times 1,000. Infant mortality rates have improved over the past 60 years, decreasing in both developed and less developed countries. There was an 89% decrease for more developed countries, but only a 67% decrease for less developed countries. This graph from the OECD shows the infant mortality rate by country for 2016. It shows that the United States is far behind Iceland, Finland, and Japan. The infant mortality rate for the US in 2016 was 5.9 deaths per 1,000 live births, but for Iceland it was only 0.7 deaths, and for Finland and Japan only 1.9 to 2 deaths. And because we know you're curious, Canada's infant mortality rate is lower than the US at 4.7 deaths, but still a little bit higher than the UK's at 3.8 deaths. However, statistics show that the United States pays the most amount of money for healthcare than any other country. So how can this be? Their infant mortality rate is much higher than countries who do not spend as much on healthcare. It could be in the way that different countries define infant mortality. Some deaths are not reported if the infant is born with a weight of less than 500 grams, or the gestational period is less than 22 weeks. The United States does include these numbers as births, whereas other countries may not. Another reason could be due to the healthcare provided before, during, and after birth. The leading causes of infant death in the United States in 2016 were from birth defects, preterm births and low birth weight, sudden infant death syndrome, known as SIDS, maternal pregnancy complications, and from accidents and injuries such as suffocation. This graph outlines the proportion of infant mortality for each cause. To further understand infant mortality, the infant mortality rate can be broken down into two sections: the neonatal mortality rate and the post-neonatal mortality rate. The neonatal mortality rate is the period from birth to 27 days of age. It reflects poor prenatal care, low birth weights, infections, lack of proper medical care, injuries, premature delivery, and congenital defects. The post-neonatal mortality rate is the number of infants that die between 28 days and 1 year of age. This measurement reflects poor nutrition and infectious diseases and is primarily used to track less developed countries' infant mortality rate. From these figures, we can see that white and Asian Americans have the lowest mortality rate, whereas Black and Native Americans have the highest rates. Even though all the rates of mortality have decreased, the highest are still among Black and Native Americans. Infant mortality tends to be the highest among non-Hispanic Black Americans, as well as in some of the southern states of the U.S., even though the overall infant mortality rate is only 5.9 deaths per 1,000 live births. There is quite a big difference between states and ethnicities that need to be addressed.
Now moving on to the causes of infant mortality rate. Mortality rate is considered more of a social problem, not medically. It is also important to understand that high mortality rates in the U.S. are from poor housing, lack of nutrition, poor supervision, and lastly, poor economic and social. The poor condition can worsen the infant's health, allowing them to become more exposed to infections. Some of the main causes of infant mortality rates are too much focus on prenatal care, lack of maternity protection, birth delivery intervention, and lack of educational and social support, so why midwife is important. The United States has advised more prenatal care as the most superior solution for infant mortality. They believe that lack of visits equals higher risk of mortality. However, studies have concluded that prenatal care should not be the #1 solution. Instead, look at smoking and social support to help decrease risk of low birth rates in babies. The second cause is lack of maternity protection. Most countries provide special benefits or grant of money for each child born if there's no more maternity payment. Um, so this graph here shows all of the European countries. So there's England, Finland, and Scotland. These countries show longer periods of paid maternity leave. The next graph here is basically showing that United States does not guarantee any maternity or parental leave. So that being said, uh, having the proper funding can help fulfill the requirement in order to reduce risk of infant mortality. So that being said, being able to have the proper housing and nutrients for the infant and mother as well. The next cause is birth delivery method. So there are many methods such as C-section, forceps, and vacuum extractor. So World Health Organization stated that countries with the lowest mortality rates have C-section rate less than 10%. So that being said, for United States, they have C-section rate of 24%, which is actually almost doubled when compared to other countries. So there's that correlation with the high mortality rate and high C-section rate. So there is actually, with the C-section method, a risk of illness and death for the women and baby. As well, the other delivery method, such as forceps, can actually cause complications such as facial nerve injury and neonatal transfusion. The last cause is lack of educational and social support. So studies done in Europe found that intervention rate to be lower in countries where midwives are independent or stronger in its contribution to maternity care. So the reason for that is part of the duties of being a midwife is to stay with a woman throughout the stages of pregnancy, labor, and post-labor. So obviously this allows the mother to gain support and education throughout all of the stages.
Now that we understand what infant mortality is, as well as what its likely causes are, we can take a look at methods of prevention. Research suggests that policy changes focusing on preventing preterm births and reducing post-neonatal mortality would help to preserve the life of young infants. Although some policies have been made for preterm birth prevention, not much has been done to help the post-neonatal mortality rate. Let's delve even deeper. If the United States could match its post-neonatal mortality rate to that of a country like Austria, the number of deaths in the U.S. would lower by 1 for every 1,000 infants. To achieve this, the United States should consider spending more on infant health care and medical attention. Assuming that the current standard of spending on each life is $7 million US, it would be well within reason to spend $7,000 US per infant. Another worthy application of spending is maternity leave. Giving mothers paid leave from work for a period of time before and after birth could help to improve the infant mortality rate. A country like Finland, for example, offers pregnant women a total of 10 months of paid maternity leave, 1 month before the infant is born and 9 months after. Finally, the United States could adopt a health care program that is quite universal to many European countries. This program involves nurses visiting parents and infants in the home. This not only provides easy access to infant health checkups, but also provides opportunities for parents to get advice and support. One can only hope that the U.S. improves its strategies and that infant mortality improves in the years to come.